In this video, you will learn how to add the email and password registration as well as email and password logging functionality to our application. You'll also be able to add a reset password functionality to our application, as well as give the ability to the user to log out from the application. So let's jump into it. Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Flutter Awesome Notes application series. For this video, I'll again follow the official documentation from the Firebase website to add the email and password authentication. So let's go to the browser and type Flutter Firebase Auth, and I'll go to the second link and I'll provide it in the description section for you. And let's start from the beginning. So first of all, the first step is to copy this command. Okay, it'll add the Firebase Auth plugin to our project, and I'll go to the terminal and paste that in here. So now that this package is added to our application project, then we can run the application and import the Firebase Auth package. And I'll do this afterwards, but before that, we'll go to the password authentication option in the left menu, because that's what we're doing in this video. And now we have to enable the email and password sign-in in our Firebase project. So for that, we'll go to the Firebase console, and now we'll go to the project that we created before. In this case, it is this one. Okay, but first of all, I want to show something by another new project, because I came here before and enabled the password and email option, and I'll show you how it looks with your project for the first time. So I'll go to this project and it'll show you something like this. Okay, here you can find the authentication in here, but if you couldn't find that, you can come to this left menu and then click on the build option and then click on the authentication option. And then once that is on the screen, you can click on the get started option and then click on the email and password option, and then again click on the enable and then click on save. And now we can use the email and password in our Flutter application. And now we can start using this chunk of code for creating a new user, or let's say registering the new user. And for signing in the user, we can use this chunk of code. And we can use this code directly, like whenever we click on this create my account button, but that would be not so clean way of doing things. And in our case, I want to do it in the registration controller class in here, because this is our change notifier for registration. So for that, first of all, we have to introduce 3 fields for the full name, email address, and password. And once we have them in this class, then we can use another method, let's say authenticate. And that method could be called from this create my account button or log me in button in the sign in case. So for that, first of all, let me introduce a string, and I'll say full name equals to an empty string, and then I want to set the full name, so I'll say full name string value, and then I'll say full name equals to value, and then I will notify the listeners. And let me just correct this one, and then to get this one, I'll say string get full name, and I'll just return the full name, but I want to trim it, so to remove any spaces around the name. And the same thing for the email address, so I'll just copy this one and then duplicate it, and then what I'm going to do is choose this full name and turn it to email, and also this one and turn it to email. And for email, we also trim the email from empty spaces. And the final thing is going to be for the password. And I'll just get what my AI code assistant suggests me. So for password, we set the password, and for getting the password, there is a little trick, and that is we don't want to trim the password because maybe this space is also a part of the password. Amazing. Now how to update these fields? Very easy. We go to the registration page, and for the full name in this not form field we had the onChanged function, and this would come with a new value. And in here I'll just simply call the registration controller dot, and I'll say full name is equal to new value. And the same thing, I'll just copy it and paste it for the email address and just change this to email. And the final thing is going to be for the password, and let me just replace this with password. Now whenever we have something in these fields, they will be available in the registration controller within these fields. And now for authenticating the user, I'll just define a function, and it is going to be a future of void, and I'll say authenticate with email and password. And this is going to be an async function. And now we can authenticate the user in here, but I want to remove the pure authentication code to a different class. Okay, so I'll go to the lib folder and create a new folder, and that is going to be services. And inside the services, I want to create a new file called auth service.dart. And now I'll create a class auth service, and I want to make it so that no instance is created. Everything is going to be static. And in here I'll say static register, and in here I'll just pass a string for, let's say, email, and another string for password, and also one for required string full name. So these three options. And now in here we can use the code that the documentation suggests. So here's the code, and I'll copy this part and then paste it in here, and then import the Firebase auth package, and also make this asynchronous function. And for email address we can use the email. And let me make this function of type future of void. So calling this code could end up with errors. So to handle the errors, we will wrap this with a try and catch block. And in the catch statement, we will say rethrow the error. So we are not handling it directly in here, but we're throwing to the caller of this function, which in our case is going to be in the registration controller, and that is going to be the authenticate with email and password. So now I will simply say auth service dot register, and for the full name we have full name and email and password. All of them are in place, and in here we will just handle the exceptions, and I will say try, and in here I'll say on Firebase auth exception catch e, and then show the dialog, and here it'll show the dialog. And if that is not a Firebase auth exception, then again show another dialog. Okay, so I'll show the dialogs to the user that something went wrong. And now this function is going to be for both registering the user and signing in the user. So how do we distinguish between those two? Very simple. We have the isRegisterMode property. So in here I will say if isRegisterMode, okay, then call this part of the code, else we can create the sign in the user method in the auth service afterwards. Now let's work on the dialog part. What kind of dialog we want to show. So in the dialogs file, we have show confirmation dialog and show new tag dialog. And our new dialog is going to be called message dialog because we only want to show a message to the user. So I'll just duplicate this code and call this show message dialog, and it'll get a context and let's say message, and instead of the confirmation dialog, we'll go in here and just copy all of this code because it is going to be almost the same one, and create a new file for that called message dialog.dart, and I'll paste that in here, and I'll just rename these two to message dialog, and I'll just rename this to message. Other thing that I want to do is to add the dialog card in here, and I want to import that from the widgets folder, and the text part is fine, but in here we just want one button, and the label is going to be okay, and we'll just pop the context and then return nothing, okay, because this is just a message, not an action dialog. And then yeah, this one is fine. So as you can see, we added the dialog card inside this widget because so far we did it kinda wrong, because here we have the dialog card, in here we have the dialog card too, and here we have the dialog card again. So what's the need to add this like each time? Why not add it inside each widget? So we'll remove this from here and also from here too, and we'll go inside that and add the dialog card widget in here. And also for this one, we'll go to the new tag dialog and add the dialog card widget in here, and we can remove this import because it is not used. And for the title, okay, this is still confirmation dialog, but it is going to be message dialog, and we'll import that, and as the message we will add the message. So now we can go to the registration controller and in here add those messages. But how do we distinguish between these messages? So Firebase Auth package comes with a whole lot of exception messages, so we can access them through e.message property. So what I'm going to do is go to the constants file and in here add those messages. Okay, I'll copy and paste them. So I just copy pasted a map of string to string. So in the key, there are all the messages that comes with the Firebase Auth package. Not all of them, but the most prominent ones. And then the messages that we want to show to the user, because these messages are not that much informative to the user, and we want to show something more descriptive. So now I'll go to the registration controller, and here I'll just say show message dialog, and we will pass the context to this, and as the message we will just say auth exception mapper, and as the key we will just use the e.code. Okay, so this is giving me error, and that's because the argument type of string can be assigned to this parameter. So if the code is not available, I'll just say an unknown error occurred, and we need the context for this, so we will just pass the build context in this method, and it is going to be required. And now the error is gone in here, and the same thing we can do is just to copy this one and paste it in here, and in this case, we don't want to use the auth exception mapper, and the message is going to be just an unknown error occurred. And okay, the dialog part is done. And now as you can see, the register is a future. So we'll just wait for this. And then we can add some extra conditions in here and say context.mounted return. Okay, if not context.mounted, and the same in here. So this check guarantees that the current context is in the widget tree. And now it's time to call this method from the registration page. And we'll find the button for that, and that is this one. So this line of code validates all of these fields. And as you can see, it returns a Boolean. So if it is validated, this will return a true. If it is not, then it will return a false. And in our case, we want to sign in the user if the form is validated. So we can just simply add an if check around this statement. And I will say if foreign key.current state.validate. And now this can result in a null because of this operator. So what we're going to do is just add false in here. So that means if this part is null, then it means that we are not going to move forward to the registration. And now in here we'll say registration controller dot authenticate with email and password. So this will authenticate the user, and when that's clicked, we want to show some loading indicator in here. So to do that, first of all, we'll go to the registration controller and add additional property in here, and we'll say bool is loading. So this will determine if we are authenticating the user, and whenever we want to authenticate with email and password, we will start the loading. So we will say is loading is going to be true. And then whenever we do our job, so after that we will just add the finally class and say is loading equals to false. So it means that if this is successful, then it'll stop the loading. And if it is not successful, it'll again stop the loading, because in both cases, we want to remove the loading indicator. So now we can listen to this specific property in the registration page, specifically in the note button part, and we can replace this label with a loading indicator. But how we're going to do this, because the label is a string and the loading indicator is going to be a widget. So for that, we'll go to the note button, and instead of a string, we'll make this a widget, and we'll call this child. Okay. And after that, in here, we'll just replace this with child. And now that this is used in so many places, we have to go in there and remove all the errors in there first. So first of all, we are in here. So instead of the label, we'll change this to child, and then wrap this with a text. Okay. And then also in here, we'll just replace this with child and wrap this with a text. Okay, so now we can go again to the registration page. And in here, we have this note button. Now what I'm going to do is wrap the note button with selector, and I'll say registration controller, and from that I want to listen to a boolean, and in the selector I will specify that I want the controller dot is loading, and in the builder function we'll just say is loading, and then we'll return the note button, and now we will say is loading. Okay, we want a circular progress indicator otherwise a text widget. And I want to wrap this with a sized box and give it a width of 24 and also a height of 24, and also give it a color of white. Okay, so we'll show the progress indicator, and also we want to disable the button from clicking. Okay, to do that, we'll just simply say is loading, then just pass the null, otherwise this function. Amazing. So now this part is done, and we'll again go to the registration controller. Now, whenever the user registers, we want to replace this page with the main page, okay, so that the user can add the notes. So we'll go to the main.dart file, and in here we have the registration page in place. But how do we switch it to the main page whenever the user is signed in? First of all, we will go to the auth service, and now we'll go to the documentation again, and I'll go to the get started part. And when we scroll down, here's a part saying check the current auth state. So you can read this, but what I'm going to specifically say that there are 3 streams on the Firebase auth instance. Okay, one is the auth state changes. So this stream emits whenever a listener is registered, which is naturally the case, and then when the user is signed in, and when the user is signed out. Then there's another stream, and that is ID token changes, which contains the 3 from the previous one, and another when there is a change in the current user token. Okay, and there is the final one, which is the user changes, and that is something that we're going to use, and that contains the 4 cases from the previous 2 and 1 additional one, which is one of these methods provided by Firebase auth.instance.current user are called. So for that, first of all, I'll go to the auth service and add a static final auth, that is going to be Firebase auth, because we're going to use this so much, so it is good to have it in a field. So now we can replace this part with auth, and the other thing is going to be static stream of user. Okay, and I'll call it user stream, and let's just make this a getter, and I'll just say auth.user changes. And now we can listen to this stream in our main.dart file in here, and I'll just wrap it with a stream builder, and the stream is going to be auth service, okay, service dot user stream, and this is going to be user. And then in the builder, I'm going to say if snapshot dot has data means that there is a user available, then show me the main page, otherwise the registration page. Okay, I hope that is clear. And now let me go to the registration controller. Okay, I think everything is on place. So what I'm going to do is just hot restart this. So first of all, I'll go to the Firebase console, and then go to the project, and then the authentication part, and then the user tab. And let's see what is happening if we try to register the user. So first of all, I'll provide a full name, foo, and then for the email address, I'll just provide an email address. And then for the password, we'll just provide some password. And then let's click on the create my account button. And as you can see, there's an error occurring. Okay, so the message dialog is working fine. And now we can click on the OK to dismiss the dialog, and let's see what is the error. Okay, let's try again. So set Android enable on back info callback true in the application manifest. Okay, let's copy this chunk of code and go to the manifest. So let me add it in here, and let's just hot restart this again. Okay, so now let's just give it a name and then an email address and then a password. And now let's click on the create my account button. And now as you can see, it is loading, so it is registering the user and it is headed to the main page. And now if we go to the authentication page in the project and refresh it, then we have a new user created. So now the user can be created, and now the user can add any kind of email, okay? And we don't want that. We want the users to first verify their email addresses, and then we will allow them to go to the main page of the application. To do that, now that we are creating the user in here, now this is a feature, then we can add then, and this feature returns a user credential. So in here it is going to be a credential, and in here we want to send a verification email to the provided email address by the user. To do that, we'll say credential dot user, okay, and then send email verification. And now this will send a verification email to the user, and besides that we will add the credential and user and dot update display name, and we'll update it with a full name that we're getting in the parameters. So now that this is done, that the email verification is done, now we will go to the registration controller, and in here that we call the register method. When this is done, we'll say show message dialog, and I'll just paste the message, and that is going to be this one. So now how do we listen to the changes if the email is verified? We go to the auth service, and in here I'll just introduce a static bool and get is email verified, and that is going to be something like this: auth current user that email verified, otherwise it is going to be false. And now we can use this method inside the main.dart file, and in here we will say if snapshot.hasData means that there is a registered user, and also auth service that is email verified. If these two are done, then go to the main page, otherwise stay in the registration page. So now, as we saw in the documentation, this user changes is only called in these cases, and in here the verify email option is not available. So even if the user verifies their email, the stream is not emitting a new state. So how to emit a new state? We'll use the reload method on the current user. So when the reload method is called, this stream will trigger a new state. And when the new state is triggered, we will check for this statement again. And if the email is verified, then we'll go to the main page. So where to call the reload method? Very straightforward, and the registration control after this dialog. So now in here we will just reload the user. So to do that, we'll again go to the auth service, and in here first of all I want to get the user. So for that I'll say static user get user, and that is going to be auth.current user. And now we can use this user in here and in the registration controller too. So we will say auth service dot user and dot reload. So this will reload the user just one time, but we want to reload it until the user verifies their email. So for that, we'll wrap this with a while, and we want to run this loop if auth service that is email verified. Okay. And we'll add a not operator. So while the email is not verified, just reload the user for me. Now this will reload it like in a fraction of second or even millisecond, but we don't want that because this will overload our application resources. So for that, we'll just say future.delayed, and we'll give it a duration of seconds. So we'll say after each 5 seconds, just do the reload part. So now we are reloading the user until the email is verified, and we're doing it each 5 seconds. And okay, now we can run the application again, but before that I will again check for the if not context mounted return. And now let's hot restart this, but before that we have to go to the authentication part and delete the user so that we can register it again. And also, not to forget, we have to add a wait before this future.delayed. So be careful with that. If you don't add that, it'll just crash your application. So now let's do a hot restart. Okay, so now the application is restarted, but as you can see, it is showing this page again. Okay, and that's because in the cache of this application, the authentication is still available. So to get rid of that, we have to go to the application and then click on the app info. So then go to the storage and cache and then clear the cache, and let's see if this works, and hopefully it works. And now let's do a hot restart again. Okay, it's not working, so the only option is going to be to uninstall the application. Now let's uninstall the application and then run it again. Okay, so we're good to go for now. Let's give it a name and then an email address and then a password. And when we click on the button, the loading is shown, and after that a dialog is shown. A verification email is sent to the provided email address. Please confirm your email to proceed to the app. So this is you, and we'll just change it to your. Okay, small change. And then when we click on the OK button, this is still loading, and that's because this one is running. And then when we go to our email address, let me just open that. So now we are sent an email address, and then when we click on that, we have this link. Okay, and please remember that if you have created your project recently and specifically you have enabled the email and password authentication option, as we did in the start of this video, then I don't know, there is an error or bug or something in the Firebase itself in these times, and that's why this specific video was postponed almost 3 weeks, because this problem still existed, and that is that the API key is not given in this link. Okay, so it will not work. Okay, but if you wait for, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks, then it will work and the API key will be given in this link. So keep that in mind. And now let me just bring this window in here and see if we click on this link. Okay, we are just headed to another page, and it'll say that your email has been verified, and look at this page, we are headed to the main page. And yeah, that magic worked. So here the auth service that is email verified became true, and we're headed to the main page. Amazing. So now the user creation or registration to say is working, and now let's also make this button work, which is the logout button, and that would be so much easy. So first of all, we'll go to the auth service and just define a method in here, and I'll say future of void logout or sign out, whatever you like, and we'll just say auth.signout, and we'll call this method from that button in the main page, and that is going to be in the actions part and this one. Okay, so in here we'll just say auth service dot logout. Okay, we have to call this method, but it is an instance method and we have to change it to a static method. Now this will work, and whenever we save this code and now click on this button, okay, we'll be logged out and just headed to the register page again. And how this worked through this user stream, because when we are logging out, then the user stream will dispatch a new event, and in that event this part will be false because we are not having any data, means that we are not having any signed in user. So that's why it'll just head us to the registration page. Amazing. Now the registration works, and let's work on the sign in part. And that's really straightforward. The only thing we have to do is go to the auth service part, and here we have to, let's say, introduce another method, and that is going to be static future of void, let's say login, and for that we'll just need the email and password, not the full name. And after that we'll just say try, and then await auth.sign in with email and password, and email is going to be email, and also the password is going to be the password. And we have to add async to this function, and after that we will just catch the error and then rethrow it to its caller. And now we'll call this function inside the registration controller, and specifically in this method. And so far we worked in the, if it is in register mode, we will register the user, otherwise we will sign in the user, and in here we'll just say auth service dot login, okay, with email and password. Okay, and we will await for this too. So if I hot reload this and then try to, give some random email address, let's say something.com, and then a password, and then if we log in, then there is an error occurred, and we're giving this message. And this message came from the constants file in here. So this message is shown, okay? So the code was invalid credential. And now, if we just give it the email that we just registered, so I'll give that email and say something like this, and let's give it a different password, and let's see how this reacts. So your provider credentials are not valid again. And now if we give the right password, then it will go to the home page. Okay, so the sign-in is also working fine. And now also we can use the logout button again, and we'll be headed to the sign-in page. And now the only thing we have to work for is the forgot password part. If in some cases the user forgets the password, we have to have a backup option. So to do that, we'll go to the auth service and introduce a new method, and let's say static and future of void reset password, and we'll get an email for that, and I'll say auth dot send password reset email for the email. And now we can call this method inside the registration controller, and we'll have to introduce a new method for password reset. So we'll say future of void reset password, and we'll get a build context and also an email, and the context is also going to be required. Okay, And now we will again do this in try in catch, and in the try part we'll say await auth service.reset password, and in the catch part that is going to be almost the same as this one, so I'll just copy this from here to here. Okay, nothing different. And first of all we have to again set the isLoading to true, and we'll use this in the reset password page, and you'll see that soon. And once the email is sent, we'll show a message dialog, and we will say a reset password link has been sent to this email. Open the link to reset your password. Okay, and again we have to use the if not context mounted return. And yeah, I think that is it. Now where should we use this method? In a new page, and we're going to create it in the pages folder, and we'll call it recover password page.dart. This is going to be a stateless page, recover password page, and it will contain a scaffold and then app bar, and in the app bar we'll have a title that will say recover password, and then we will have a leading, and let me get this from the new or edit note page. Here we had that back button, so we can use that again in here, and that is this one. So one thing we can do is just extract this to, let's say, note back button, and let me just move this to the widgets folder, note back button.dart, just paste it in here, and also import these libraries. And now we'll just import the new location for the note back button, and also we can use it in here, note back button. Okay, and then for the body we'll have a column, a very simple page, and then a text, and we'll say don't worry, happens to the best of us. A nice message. And then we'll just add a note form field, and after that we'll just add a note button, and as the child we'll add send me a recovery link, and as the on pressed, and we'll write this, but first of all let's add a sized box in here and give it a height of 48, and then let's copy this and paste it in here too, and then give the column a main axis alignment of center, and a cross axis alignment of stretch. And also let's make this to the center, and let's see how this looks so far. So we'll just connect this to this little button. So I'll go to the registration page and then find the forgot password, and this is a text, so we have to make it clickable. So just add a gesture detector, and on the on tap we'll go to this page by navigator dot push and material page route, and that is going to be password. Okay, recover password page. Okay, and now if we hot reload this and go to the forgot password page, here we have the page, and we have to make some changes to this. First of all, we have to add some padding around this, let's say 16. And let's also change this spacing to half of it, 24. And also make the form field fill color is going to be white. And also make the field to true. And let's just give this more height by wrapping it with a sized box and giving it a height of 48. And let's see how this looks now. Okay, very good. The one final thing is going to be the alignment, and that is going to be text align dot center. Amazing. And we have to also add the label text, and that is going to be email. And for getting this email, we have to turn this to a state full widget, and then introduce a late final text editing controller, email controller. And also to validate this email, we need a global key of form field state email key. And then I'll introduce the init state method so that we can initialize our text editing controller. And then we'll introduce the dispose method and get rid of the email controller in here. Dot dispose. And now let's connect this text editing controller to the note form field through the controller. Okay, and also the key is going to be the email key. And now when we press this button, first of all, we will just validate the email key. And then when that is validated, now we can call the registration controller and send the reset email. So to do that, I'll say context.read. I want to read the registration controller, and then I want to call the reset password method. So context is going to be context, and email is going to be email controller.text.trim. So once this button is clicked, I want to also change this to a loading indicator and also make this not tappable. To do that, again, we'll just wrap this with selector of registration controller of type boolean, and then in the selector we'll just return the is loading, and as the builder we'll just say is loading, and we'll return the note button. And now in here, if is loading, then just give me a circular progress indicator, otherwise a text. And this circle progress indicator should be smaller than its original size, so we'll wrap it with a sized box and give it a width of, let's say, 24 and also a height of 24. And the color is going to be white. And one thing that I want to do before is going to the note button and add a disabled background color, and that is going to be gray 300, and a disabled foreground color, and that is going to be black. Okay, and now if we just add all the consts, and then we'll just hot reload this. Okay, and now if we write our email in here, and first of all, let's do something like this to see if the validation is working, and it will not work because we have not added the validator yet. So we'll say validator.emailValidator, and we have to import this. And now if we hot reload, so if we click on this, then email is not in a valid format. Okay, again, not in a valid format, so this is working. So I'll just give a valid email address. Okay, and then click on the send me a recovery link, and then it'll show me this message, and we'll check the email. But as you have noticed, the background color of the button didn't change, and that is because we have to also add one other thing, and that is loading. Okay, this is going to be null, so it is not tappable. Okay, and now if we go to our email again and see if something new has come in here. Okay, so now we have a reset password link, so we can click on that, and now we can set our new password. Let's say I'm setting a new password, let's say 141 this time. The previous time was 121 or 131. I couldn't remember, and now we can hit the save button. Okay, and now we can go back and give the email address and also the password, the new password, 141. Okay, and then hit the log me in, and now we're good to go. Okay, so now I think we're done, but one little thing, by clicking this button, we are logged out directly, but we have to show the user a confirmation dialog for this. So what we have to do is go to the registration page, the main page, and then in here we have to first show a dialog. So we'll say show confirmation dialog, and the title is going to be, do you want to sign out of the app? And now this will return a boolean, so we will say final boolean should log out, and we'll await for this. And we have to add an async in here to make this function asynchronous to be able to use the await keyword. And now this is nullable boolean, so if this is null, then we'll return false. Means if the user tapped outside of the confirmation dialog, again it means that they do not want to sign out. So now we'll say if only should log out, then log is out. And now if I hot reload this and then click on this button, then this nice confirmation dialog is shown. Clicking outside of it will just return this false, so we're not logging out the user. Clicking on it again and pressing the no button, this part returns false. And if we click on the yes, then we're logged out. Whew, okay, this is for this video. We did the email and password registration, email and password signing in, and also the forgot password, and also the log out functionalities. So thanks for watching, and if you like the series, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button on each video that you watch, and share the series and the channel with your friends who can benefit from them. And until then, have a good time, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.